Welcome to the Digital Data Management for Native American Language Documentation, Archiving, and Use, a forum with Dell project directors. I am Colleen Fitzgerald, and I'm representing the National Science Foundation. The Documenting Endangered Languages is an initiative that's joint between National Science Foundation and National Endowment for the Humanities, and Mary Downs in the back row is my counterpart at NEH. It's a joint funding initiative, but grants are submitted to the National Science Foundation through the FastLane or GrantsGov mechanisms, and all review and panel discussion is handled through NSF. The base budget for Dell in NSF is $2.3 million for fiscal year 2016, pending, I think, a bill from Congress. I think we're in budget limbo right now. But there's funds from other programs at NSF and NEH, so we really have something close to $4.5 million annually to fund proposals. We collaborate with polar programs, Arctic Social Sciences. We partner with SISE, which handles computational linguistics and applications, and the TCUP, Education Human Resource Development Program at NSF. If you I encourage you to read the Dell solicitation. It's NSF 15-567, and that describes all the elements specific to Dell. And you will note that Dell does not fund language revitalization. In Dell, we have 3 areas of emphasis: language description, so that could be field work with remaining speakers; documentation; preparation of dictionaries, grammars, databases. There's infrastructure grants, so digitization and creation of access to documentary methods, materials, workshops and conferences. And then there's also a computational methods strand, which would be looking to develop standards and tools to make data more widely available, or to annotate data in a more automated fashion. And this is typically collaborations with theoretical and computational and field linguists. Since we're talking about data today and mobilizing data, one of the elements in the Dell proposal that's required, and it's required for every NSF proposal, is the data management plan. It's 2 pages maximum, and it describes how the work in the proposal will conform to NSF guidelines, their policy on disseminating and sharing research results. As noted in the solicitation, language documentation is of little value if it can't be accessed. And so the expectation under the Dell funding mechanism is that the vast majority of data that Dell funds projects to collect will be publicly accessible with minimal restrictions. So if you're in a community where that's not the way that your community wants things to go, it would be better to find another funding mechanism, because in your proposal you have to outline access. So your data management plan might include the types of data, samples. It could include curriculum materials, software, recordings, field notes, the standards to be used for data and metadata format and content. And there's some great slides on the Colleen 2014 website by Nick Tieberger on data management, but I'm sure there's things in other places as well. Policies for access and sharing. So this might address privacy protection, confidentiality, security, intellectual property issues, or other rights or requirements. And then policies and provisions for reuse, redistribution, and the production of derivative materials. So it's important to note that also in our new TCUP strain, which includes building research and training capacity in documentary and descriptive linguistics, that there is a possibility of creating a training support stream of funding for archiving and preservation skills. And if you would like to learn a little bit more about this, I encourage you to go to the Dell outreach videos, which are freely available on YouTube, and it includes one video on archiving and data management, which Gary Holton, one of our panelists, is part of. And actually, I have handouts, and I can get those ready later, but I have that link and to the Dell outreach videos, to a Dell webinar, which will be in late January, and to the Dell program page where there are links to the solicitation. The deadline is Tuesday, so there's still some time. And we keep announcements and things like that, like a FAQ, a frequently asked questions. So, all right, I'm going to turn it over to our panelists. We have 3 panelists here today. We have Gary Holton, we have Susan Gare, and we have Jack Martin. And they're each going to talk about their Dell-funded projects, giving you an example of the range of activities that Dell funds and the range of issues that come up and plans for handling them in terms of the data. Thank you.
Here? Yes. So hello, I'm Gary Holton, Director of the Alaska Native Language Archive, and I'll talk some about Dell-funded projects that I'm aware of and involved with, but also projects in Alaska. And one thing that's a bit unique about Alaska is we have other funding streams coming in as well. So as Colleen mentioned, a lot of times people will use Dell as one funding mechanism together with other sources as well within NSF and beyond NSF and NEH to put together ways of funding a project. And that can be a way to get at some of these issues that we've talked about, like limitations on how to incorporate language revitalization and other sorts of project goals. So I'll talk a bit about what I'm calling mobilizing language resources, and this includes a number of different things. Basically, how to take existing resources and provide better access to them and make them more useful and enhanced for a variety of different purposes, whether it's for additional research, whether it's to make reference materials that are more easily accessible, or to be used by language learning programs. So a few different examples of different mobilization projects that we've worked with through the Alaska Native Language Archive with DEL funds. One is the eacpeople.com's site, which is a project put together by the EAC Preservation Council to pull together archival resources from within the archive on the EAC language and make them more broadly accessible. So these include recordings from the early 1960s, and they've even built a very gamified language learning site that allows you to go in and play little games and do language tests and things. So I think they have 8 or 9 lessons up now, all drawing on the archival resources from the Alaska Native Language Archive. Here's another example with the Denaki or Upper Kuskokwim Athabaskan language, where they've built a somewhat interactive website with story booklets and things. But they've essentially taken archival resources but made them much easier to access and much more useful and exciting for people, and built an interactive dictionary, for example, using the archival resources. So that's one, and including an iPad app and so on. Another type of thing that's going on in Alaska that we've done a lot of work with is reaching out to what I sometimes call community language archives or regional language archives. So people have worked with us to develop repositories within communities that can draw on the resources that are at the Alaska Native Language Archive, but also draw on all the resources and expertise within the community. And these can be really very useful and fruitful projects. The stars are just some of the archives that we work with and have memorandum of agreements with to share information. I'll just give a couple of examples. One is the Kadichnak Archive, which is the Ahtna Language Archive in Copper Center, Alaska. And they've had funding through an NSF, I think partly through Dell Pride, but also through IMLS. And a few other sources to build up this archive and bring materials that are already in the archive at the University of Alaska, but then draw on resources from the community. And the amazing thing is that when the resources are right there are speakers like Marco Pete here, who's in the top photo there, who can just drop by and say, oh yeah, I know who's on that recording. So we have recordings that may say recording number 679, no date, no speaker, nothing on it, and by having the resources right there in the community, speakers can come in and enhance the descriptions and make those recordings much more useful. Another example is the Jinjijuk Gwichin Archive, which is undertaking a similar effort in Fort Yukon in northern Alaska. So these are great ways to work with language resources that exist, but bring them back to the community and add value to them, so to speak, add more information, work with existing speakers, and build on the existing archival resources. And this is increasingly something that we're heavily involved in Alaska, and I think something that is becoming increasingly important across North America. So here's a little picture of Community Language Archive and the way things interact. But Colleen already talked about data management plans. I just point out a few things that just bear in mind that backup is not the same as archiving. I repeat this all the time when I'm talking to people, but there's a very big difference between putting something on my flash drive and putting it in an archive. If I take this flash drive with me and I walk outside and the taxi runs me over, which is almost happened a few times, nobody knows this was in my pocket and this contained like the entire EAC archive or something, right? So it's gone. The emergency room guy isn't going to look for it. They're probably going to toss it in the trash. So the institutional commitment is really what you're after. So as part of your data management plan, this is a chance to talk to an institution, right? Talk to somebody like the Alaska Native Language Center or some other relevant repository. Maybe it's a tribal repository, a university repository, whoever it is. Those guys want to talk to you. I've been talking to people for the last month because everybody's getting ready for their DEL proposals and talking about what sort of data management plan would make sense for various different projects. So I really encourage you to look for a repository that's relevant and talk to them about how you can develop this data management plan. The archives are your friend, and they will really want to help you in this effort, because they're also interested in making sure that this information is preserved. I won't say more about access restrictions, but that's, again, a conversation you can have with the repository that you're talking to. So if you have issues about particular access restrictions, have that conversation with your archive and talk about how you might implement those. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Aiki, Nanethwaiti Susan Gare, Karuk Wahi Nichu Piti. My name is Susan Gare, and I'm speaking Karuk. First of all, I want to thank NSF and DEL for funding our project. It's really an exciting opportunity that we've been building up to for a long time, and I know that DEL says they're very clear. They don't fund revitalization, but the taking care of the data, the language information that we've been gathering since we started revitalizing our language at the Karuk tribe. Even before I got started with language, so the 60s and 70s, and the stuff that was gathered before and is in other archives. Several years ago, while I was language program director for my tribe, I'm sitting there at my desk one day and thinking about all these all these materials, the ones that we made ourselves and the ones that other people are starting to give back to us, and thinking about what are we going to do with them. And a lot of my, I would get requests regularly from people, tribal community people, other, people who are doing research on our language, are people that are in institutions, in jails and prisons, and people wanting copies and wanting to learn the language. And it was like, well, how do I provide access to all this stuff? How do I provide copies? How do I maintain the originals and become a place where people want to do independent study on the language, get practicing speaking the language. And I realized all these questions were archives and library questions, and that the storage and sharing of our language, connecting the information back to the people, was part of our needed to be part of our plan. And so I was going back to graduate school again to find out how to do that. Before I go too much further on, I want to ask of the people in the audience, how many are, get a sense of who's here, how many people are thinking about or working on their DEL application? Right on. And language community people. So I'll, we just got our funding this year, and then I'm delaying a couple of things because I got an exciting opportunity to do something totally different, which I think will add to our capacity. And then I'll come back to our project in a few months. But let me tell you about that project. So as I was thinking about our information needs, our archives and library needs, one thing that I learned in that library science master's was that I did a thesis on the Breath of Life workshops, another NSF supported program, especially the national one that comes here. That the Native people that would participate in this workshop, that would bring them to an archive or to a university to do revitalization on their language through the archives, research their language through the archive for the purpose of developing new materials that would help with the language. I got to interview some participants, and they said, before Breath of Life, I could not walk on a university campus. This was not my place. And then on top of it, the archive or the special collections at the university looked even more forbidding than the main body of the campus. And but they said, everybody at Breath of Life was so welcoming, and many people have gone back to study the things that they were interested in, but also do research on their language while they're there, or to continue to do independent research in archives on their language. And so in our community, we have a number of, I'll call them language scholars on our language, and they're experts in some body of knowledge in our community, and they're doing work with the language. Well, they have all the types of materials that an archive would have, the notes and photographs and audio and video recordings. And, I've been thinking about them and wanting to, help them care for those materials, whatever they decide to do with them. And then also to have conversations about, well, have you thought about what you're going to do with your materials after you're no longer working on the language, either due to, passing on or life things that happen or changes in interests. What would you like, the transmission of that material? What do you want to do with it? And so part of our DEL project is to host a series of meetings where people come together and we talk about those things. We'd provide archival supplies to take care of their materials. They would also we're also bringing in a preservation archivist and offering them, the archivist, to go to their homes if they wanted, and maybe come up with a plan for care for their stuff, and have conversations about to maybe discuss and tear apart a deed of gift, or just talk about the idea of gifting it and to either an archive that they've maybe worked with because of Breath of Life, or they decide, it's my niece that has been working with me that's going to have those things, but to have those conversations. And those are kind of hard personal conversations to have. My first experience with that was helping the linguist that helped me with the Karuk dictionary. And when he passed in 2006, having to go to his house and help with the, packaging up the electronic files to go to the archive where they were, and to, I don't know, and being there to, not having asked him enough about, what the plans were for his paper materials, and I asked a little bit, but it's such a hard conversation to have, and wanting to have those conversations. But also, one of the things that our elders and our speaker community wants is that when we get together to talk about language, to also make a space to talk in the language. Through Administration for Native Americans, we'd gotten a grant to do video documentation, and there were all these trainings, but they were technology trainings. And, one thing we did is right in the middle of that, create a language circle and have a time during those meetings to just speak in the language. Because people want to get together. It's really hard logistically for us to get together. So when we do, we jam as much into the plan as we can. What else did I want to talk about? The project. So what, where, when, why, and who, and all our community members. Breath of Life. Yeah, we started out, and the people that would go to Breath of Life would start out by feeling, I don't belong on a university campus. Well, now they're, going to the university campus, and, and now we need to plan for our own data. We're going beyond even being researchers to being contributors to those places that hold our relatives' materials. And part of the thinking is to just demystify the whole process of demystifying digital and demystifying archives. And to understand, I was thinking about a project where we worked on the dictionary, and it's partly the language expertise that goes into it. It's partly the technology tools that go into it, and the planning of the project, and then understanding how people will interact with your data, with the language, and yeah, it was very interesting to fund a dictionary project. And people said, well, you need a dictionary, and then we got the funding to do the dictionary, and then it was like, okay, scramble, how are we going to get from the point of we have a lot of the information to getting it into a format that people recognize, and then having the training opportunities fall into our laps, and then work into get it to coming to a good stopping point in 3 years, and recognizing that a good dictionary is never finished. When I hit into a technological wall personally, or, our tribal, we don't want to do all the work involved in hosting the online dictionary to find out who would, and could we work with them on those terms. What else? I think, and like Gary said, the having a backup is not having an archive, although backups are really important on your way to, an archive is not just like a place where the data is, but having backups in the interim is very important too. I'm thinking about the thumb drive story. Another element of that was that William Bright, who was working with us, he would pack his laptop wherever he went and work on the dictionary, and he was in a train somewhere in Europe and his laptop bag was stolen, but his thumb drive was in his pocket and he'd backed up that morning, and it was like, yay, all that work, or all the work that he'd done since the last backup. It's like, yes, we have it. So you just don't know sometimes. A little bit of both. I'm going to stop there, and I look forward to hearing Jack, and then taking questions and having discussion at the end. Thank you.
So I'm going to use my own computer here, so it's going to take just a minute. Yeah. Okay, great. So while I am setting up, I want to thank and recognize Shobana Chalia in the audience, and Mary Downs and Colleen Fitzgerald for putting this panel together. And I'd also like to say, on behalf of the other panelists, that we are happy to help any program in any way. If you have a draft proposal, we would be happy to look at it or connect you to other linguists or other academics if we possibly can. Great. So a lot of the projects that Dell receives fall into the category of grammars, reference grammars basically, or dictionary projects or texts. I think, I can't really speak for Dell, but I think Dell likes to receive proposals that test that model and stretch out in interesting ways, but a lot of the proposals still fit one of those three projects. And what I'd like to talk about falls into the category of texts. And this is a project that just started this last summer. It seems like a couple of weeks ago to me, and so it seems, if anything, a little preliminary for me to be talking about it, but I'm going to do the best that I can. And so this is a project on the Muskogee language, starting in the Seminole Nation of Oklahoma. And it was funded by NEH. So some projects are funded through NSF, and some are funded through NEH. But I wanted to make sure that I recognize NEH as an important contributor. So we started on August 1st, so last month. And just to give you a little bit of context on the situation, the Muskogee language is spoken in three different tribes: the Muskogee Creek Nation of Oklahoma, the Seminole Nation of Oklahoma, and by some members of the Seminole tribe in Florida. And so we've got these three locations. And as I mentioned, this project is based on the Seminole Nation. In recent years, of those three groups, I would say the Seminole Nation is the poorest. I hope it's okay to say that. They have to look for funding the most, for outside funding. And in recent years, they have been fairly successful in getting outside funding for language-related work. In 2008, they received an ANA grant to do a survey I know Mary Lynn helped with that. It was a very impressive survey. They received 1,000 completed surveys out of a population of about 10,000. And of those 1,000 surveys, 109 people identified themselves as fluent speakers. 80% felt it was important for tribal members to know the language. And I can tell you that using these figures has been very important in terms of tribal politics, to be able to do a survey and then to go back to the tribe and to say 80% of your constituents want this. 96% favored language renewal, and 70% favored a Seminole language school. In 2012, the Seminole Nation received a second ANA grant. This time it was to develop a curriculum, an elementary school curriculum, and also to develop 2 books basically for older kids. These were based on the successful Lakota series and basically adapted, and the same artwork was used for those. They are developing a Muskogee language curriculum, basically, and they've received an extension. They're trying to finish that up now. In 2014, the Seminole Nation opened an immersion preschool, just for 1 year. It's for little guys. I think they're about 4 years old or so. And so that's Pomahaga School, near the town of Seminole. And they used a converted church. It's a fairly small building, but it has everything they need. It has a kitchen. It has a storm shelter. Here we have the kids, of course, with their garden. Here's Linda Bear. And they have nice artwork. I'm using some of the same pictures that Mary used earlier. And they have a playground now, so that's fun. The Seminole Nation also has been offering intensive master apprentice courses through Bacone College, and this is, to me, one of the most exciting things that's happening. Bacone College is basically allowing students to enroll in their Center for Tribal Languages, and the students take language classes elsewhere in Oklahoma. This summer, I think they had 14 students. For the Muskogee language, they had, I think, 3 students. And they worked for 4 weeks intensively, and they really did a good job. I don't know if you can see in this picture, but they have a picture of Bigfoot here, and the students had to describe everything that Bigfoot did during the morning, like get up and shave and wash your hair, or, and they were able to do all these activities in the appropriate tense, in the appropriate form. I was really impressed with it. So this project started more recently. Chief Leonard Harjo said something along the following. I didn't write it down, so this is a paraphrase. He said, "Even if our immersion school is successful, the children in school now may not have anyone to speak to by the time they are in their 20s. We need to document our elders so that children will have materials to learn from in the future." And so this is like your insurance policy. Try to get the kids speaking the language, but put it in a bottle also so that they'll have something to watch in the future. So the goals of the project are to make high-quality video recordings of elders speaking the language, and it's completely open-ended what they would be doing. It's conversations, it's songs, it could be a demonstration of cooking, oral history, and formal interviews. To transcribe and translate the edited videos, to do the transcription in such a way that the language in the videos can be searched and studied. So academics want to have a database, basically, of all the content in any kind of oral history program like this, and to be able to study word usage, to pull it out so that you can make dictionaries. So when we make the subtitles for videos, we have to look ahead so that these sorts of searches can be done. To follow recommended archival practices. And the last point here is maybe what is a little bit different about this project. We wanted to support and involve the 3 master apprentice students who are enrolled at Bacone and the school staff, and to give them training in language technology. So we set this up last summer, not in 2014, and what we decided to do was to shoot one video, a pilot video. And we thought if we did that, we could see how it worked and talk through all the problems. and then deal with all of those issues one at a time. So we did this in one afternoon. We decided on a topic, a couple of days earlier, and we decided we would shoot a video on how to make lye. So you drip water through ashes, and then you can use the lye as a seasoning, basically, to soften hard corn. So we did this, and it was kind of odd. They decided to do a formal cooking show, and it was a very windy day, and so it was kind of noisy. But the next day, we then went through and tried to transcribe the video and talked about the problems that we had and learned the software for doing that. And here are some of the issues that came up. If we had a larger project like this, who would be interviewed? What would they talk about? Would they be paid? Who would do the transcriptions, which is a huge amount of work? How would the transcriptions be done? Who would hold the copyright? We spent several days talking about that. Where would the materials be archived? The Seminole Nation doesn't really have the resources itself. When would the work be done? And how would we pay for the project? Because this could be quite expensive. So those were all the issues that we began to discuss during the pilot video. So that was in 2014. Exactly this time last year was when we submitted a Dell proposal. And because we had done this pilot video, we felt we could talk about that experience in the application. So we were able to talk about how long the transcription actually took, and we were able to give a realistic idea of how many hours we would be able to do in a 3-year funded project. And so we estimated that we could do 25 hours of edited video with transcriptions and subtitles. And we had already discussed methods and made decisions on some of the issues that would come up, and that helped with things like the data management plan. So we began this project a few months ago, July 1st. We set aside just 2 weeks this last August to begin the project. And so that's really what I'm reporting on, is those 2 weeks. The 3 master apprentice students took the 4 weeks of intensive language classes this last summer, and then we made a list of the interviewees, and we discussed logistics and did pre-interviews, and we did some training on the use of software. We advertised the project mostly on Facebook, but you have flyers, it's just you don't print them out. And we shot the videos, and for that we used a videographer who had retired from OU and was very experienced. We did lots of driving. That's where we drove. So we have a workflow where the videographer, Michael McCarty, sends video files to me. I use a program called Saymore to prepare the videos for transcription. It segments the audio recordings into little bits that can be transcribed. And then what I do is I use Dropbox and I share those files with the students. We're very organized. They do the transcription. I can see when they've done the transcription. I can check it, and then we can upload it. We upload the videos to Vimeo, and we're able to put together the subtitles and everything. So that gives us, the students are using Elon to do that, and I guess I won't get into the program, but basically to do the subtitles, you're given 2 columns, and basically you play like number 2 here, and you'll be able to hear just that little chunk. You spell that out in Muskogee, and then you also get the translation at the same time, and it's actually pretty easy to work that way. So the 3 students are paired up with teachers. The students receive stipends, and the teachers are paid by the hour, and we have budgeted 10 hours per week for the students and teachers to work this way for 3 years. So they're going to get a lot done that way. All right. So we're posting the results to Vimeo and using a site called Amara for the subtitles. So what are the results so far? We interviewed 10 speakers in August. We have about 5 hours of edited video, which isn't too bad. The first week was slow, actually. We only interviewed 2 people the first week. And then all of a sudden we were desperate and we interviewed 8 people the next week. We have also last year a friend of mine, someone I've known for 20 years, Juanita McGirt, called me up and she said, I'm 82, and she said, I was going through the hymn book. She said, I know 70 hymns. I would like to record those before I die. And I said, I'm happy to help you. And so we made video recordings of 70 hymns that she sang, and we're slowly uploading those and getting those analyzed and getting musical notation for them. It's going pretty smoothly. These are the 3 students and 2 of the teachers in the middle in front of the school. This is our cameraman. Here's one of the elders that we interviewed. He's a preacher. He talked a lot. He was great. This is Jerry Haney on the left. He's a former tribe of the Seminole Nation, and he had a lot of history. I found it very interesting. I thought he was going to talk all about politics. He didn't want to talk about politics. He didn't want to talk about anything controversial. He wanted to talk about his church history. So that's what we got. So the near future, this coming summer, the students will attend Colang in Alaska. The grant will pay for them to do that, to get further training. We've begun putting videos up on a website. I'll give you a quick tour in a minute. And we will shoot more video this winter and the next 2 summers. If I can just show you a little bit of the website, assuming it works. So remember, this just came up. So we've just been putting it up in the last month or so. And so we're using a WordPress site, and it just has, lots of thank yous, and it acknowledges NEH and the school and my college and all the speakers. We tried to put them all in there. If we left anyone out, please let us know. And then we have the interviews that we've done so far, and each week I'm getting more of these, and the students are doing more, and we're putting them in. And then we have the songs. We have a lot of songs already, but they're not all transcribed. So these are, ultimately, it's going to be the 70 songs, and I try to do about 10 per week right now. So it's actually working. I don't know if the sound will work here, but if so, I'll give you a little bit of demonstration. And so, wait. Okay, try to get the baby teeth here. And the way we have it, you can toggle between either the Muskogee or the English for the captions. And let me see if it starts up.
Hubida ko jinmat osulabi ungat imajolga ibaga mahira jolta jaget.
Okay, so the students did this.
Imajolga.
And that's in the Muskogee. And now I'm going to switch to the English.
In hadijiska nodi homa inja ukid always. Ma imogida o noat hangit nodi. Imish kinoat church kidogat ungat chabojimo. Chimish kidonga cho hona bano hawega se ham market maginimat. Et Joshua nodi bala market nodi ham mesit choko ona ba ham mesit o khavalidimat. Moas pokajin mijidimat. Et Joshua nodi bala maga man et Joshua man nodin pon bali don uktos kon kithagonemat. Ungat et Joshua.
Anyway, so it's been very interesting for the students to learn these things, that there are traditions for what you do with baby teeth, for example. And so it's been good for the community. And I will say, I learned this from the oral historians, that one of the most important things we learned is the importance of doing a pre-interview. So we make a point of meeting with the interviewees a day or two ahead of the interview to make a list of the topics that they really are good on. And then we have an interviewer who interviews in the language, and they know exactly what questions to ask about. So thank you very much.
Oh, there's no stairs on that side.
Hi there. Thanks, everybody. I'm Mary Downs, Program Officer at the National Endowment for the Humanities. And this has really been a collaborative effort. I want to acknowledge Shobana Chalia's work on pulling this panel together. Thanks, everybody here, Colleen, and Shobhan and I have really done a tag team here, and it's been great to hear all of these tales of what your projects have entailed, and I hope that that's given all of you in the audience here a feel for what goes into a Documenting Endangered Language project. And it just made such an impression that the amount of training that there is involved in all of this, and while documentation may be at the core of a DEL project, there is so much that happens kind of around the edges to ensure sustainability in terms of the archiving and the training and the use, which all of you have gotten at. And there are so many opportunities for including training in DEL, and I know that that's an important component. So I'm just going to open the floor up. If there are questions, address them to.
I have a question for Jack. The program that you used for the subtitles, you said was Amara?
Well, see, this gets kind of complicated. We should talk.
I do have some questions on like the software you use or even equipment.
Yeah, and so it's been a learning experience for me, but basically some software only works on Windows and some is able to use Macs also. And I use a combination of Seymour and Eline. And so what I can do is I can send you links to those, and they're both free programs. And what Amara is it's a captioning site. And what they do is they work with YouTube or Vimeo, and you give it a link to that video site, and then they allow you to upload the subtitle files that you get from some other program, and it overlays it so that you can see the subtitles over the video. And so that's what they're designed to do. But let's talk, and I'll try to get more information.
Other questions? The other thing that was just made such an impression here is how much community collaboration there is that is just absolutely core to all of the work that you're all doing. Anybody else want to share experiences that they've had, their interest in DEL, or challenges that you're having with your language materials?
One topic we didn't address much is how documentation can dovetail with language revitalization. Susan, did you want to talk about that?
Sure.
Thanks.
Grab the microphone. I know you're recording, and you can record. So let's see here. So how we use the documentation that exists, and a couple of different ways, or that was it? Yeah, okay. We might use it. So we have an online dictionary website that UC Berkeley, the linguistics program, and Andrew Garrett and Lena Mickelson help us with, or basically do the work on, and we get to benefit from it. So with recordings, people want to know how something was pronounced, or how an elder pronounced something, or how an elder who spoke in their community, because even though we don't really have dialects, people pronounce things differently, and so people want to hear that native speech, and that native speech from their communities. Also with the video, I mean, one of the things that we tribal language nerds get to compete with is YouTube and video and computer games, and so those recordings, we make and add to, media that is also enjoyment, that people get things out of. Also on that dictionary website, we have stories that people can listen to, or conversations that people can listen to. And the wider variety of materials, the more people get, that thing that we hear in language learning, that it takes, hearing something 20 times in 20 different ways for it to sink in and to sort of be part of your vocabulary.
Mm-hmm.
For Susan and Dylan for Jack, for Susan, you briefly
Yeah, so our tribal IT, and I don't mean to badmouth them at all. They have a huge job. So just our tribe, we have 3 areas where we have different facilities, from health clinics to education to housing to, they do everything. And they're these 2 guys. Ours are guys. And they have 11 billion different requirements on them. And so, and in many cases, those things are legal mandates, with our health clinics, HIPAA and secure data and all these things. And I don't like this. This is kind of how it is some ways. It's been a disadvantage and an advantage, but because language doesn't have the same sort of legal mandates pressing down on our IT department, sometimes they'll be like, if something is filled with effort or makes them stretch in a way that's not financially easy for them, they'll say no unless you can pay for it, or no unless you can bring another person on, or go find someone else to do that because we can't sustain that effort. And so I kind of get that. And in some ways, it's acknowledging that reality has been to the good, because I've seen times where they've said yes and they probably should have said no, because things will happen where something will get wildly out of date, or something will break and not get fixed, and it would have been better if I just realized their limitation at the outset. It's kind of the short answer. And then I'll let Jack take part 2.
Yeah, sure. I'm interested in the first question too, though, which is dealing with IT departments in different tribes and in different universities, because they're all different. And if you can get them excited in a project, then they'll help you, right? And if you can't get them excited, you get no help whatsoever. Yeah. But anyway, back to your other project. Your question was about what is the 25 hours? The 25 hours is of edited video, which is what we've promised to get out there to the public. But that means a larger a number of hours of unedited video. But they're not that different in this case, because we are almost editing on the fly as we record. And what I mean by that is when we do the pre-interviews, we figure out like the 5 topics we will ask about. And the method we've developed rather quickly is that we shoot those each as a separate short video, because in the day of YouTube, people want short videos that are topical, that you can kind of look up. They're not going to want to watch an hour video to find out what you do with baby teeth. And so it's funny how it all fits together and shapes your methodology. But because of that, it's sort of edited to a degree from the start. And so I wouldn't expect that we would have that many, more than 25 hours of masters. But one of the difficulties of doing a project like this is you have to archive every stage of a project. So there are the masters that have to be the unedited versions of the raw footage that has to be archived. And we're working with Sam Noble Museum in Oklahoma to archive those. And then you have the edited versions of those. And then you have the subtitles files. And a lot of people who do videos think that you should just burn the subtitles into the videos. But from an archival perspective, you want to preserve the students' spellings, and then my revisions to those spellings, and the next stage someone else's corrections, that those are all actually historically interesting and important. And so that's why I personally like to keep the subtitles files separate and have each one documented, right? With a systematic naming mechanism of some sort, so that you know exactly what they are. So I guess that's what a data management plan is I guess, as part of it, a very small part of what it is. But just being able to archive everything and back up everything and look ahead. Did I sort of get? Okay. You have like layered. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So a lot of what I do is people call or they email and they have questions. And I just thought it might be helpful to pull a few elements out of these projects and tell you how you can structure things. So for example, in the Creek project, Jack structured in training for the students. I think you put that in the participant costs. And so what he did was he built in the training costs as part of his team. Because he's also training community members in the Seminole community, it's also a broader impact. So he's broadening participation, he's training underrepresented groups in scientific methodologies and language documentation. That's a broader impact. In both Susan and Jack's project, they're working with materials that then get kind of harvested into language revitalization. That's a broader impact. So if you look at how on the grants proposal guide and on the Dell solicitation, the aspects of merit review that are involved, what it talks about is intellectual merits and broader impacts. And so the broader impacts are really clear in these projects. What about the intellectual merits? In the case of Jack, we're going to have all these transcribed stories. So this is actually, it's a great way to think about how, although Jack is a linguist who could take and do all sorts of breaking the words into pieces and do all kinds of things, that's not in this part of the project. So you could see how that project it's basically a text collection. And it's doing so in a way that's got an audiovisual component, something NEH is always very interested in, and a number of Dell projects funded by NSF do. And it's something that could be very community driven if you've got the transcriber team in your set. So there's different ways that you can think about what the solicitation or the grant proposal is asking you to have. So even though, again, we're not going to fund revitalization, these projects were great. And what Gary talked about with the archives, that's all supporting language revitalization. So what you do is you think about what the system is and what you want to do and make it fit. And again, I think the broader impacts is a place where you can really do that. And you know, that's what I tell people all the time, put the language of revitalization in broader impacts.
Sorry, and I would also add to that while the Dell solicitation may be looking at documentation and at data management plans, that broader impacts is something that really can be spun out in ways that are valuable to you and to your community, and that's where the training components come in, or the use of the materials, or using them to develop revitalization and language teaching materials. That may not be the core activity for what you're coming in to the Dell program for, the work that Dell supports. Any other questions? Shobana. And all of those other activities, the training, the archiving, the use of the data, really point to achieving sustainability, not just of the data itself, but of the language and of the community as well. So they're all really getting at the sustainability issue.
I wanted to mention budget. So Shobana mentioned all the elements of the team, and you got the sense from these projects what all can be involved. It's a really good idea to do your budget first. Here's the imaginary world of what you'd love to do if you were given unlimited resources. But your budget gets big fast, and probably people are your most expensive item. So to sit down and think about all these different elements that are involved and how much they're all going to cost, and then you're going to have the indirect cost rate. So this is sort of a tax that an institution charges the federal government for the various costs that go into running a project. And so if you write $100,000 of direct costs and you have a 50% indirect cost rate, that's a $150,000 grant right there. So it's really important to sit down with the budget people and think about all the elements that are involved and price it. And it may be that you can't put everything in your budget that you want to do. So then think about how you could do a stage of it. How could you take one component of it and put it together? And have you put all the elements, have you thought of all the elements that are going to be involved in the project? Are they all in your budget? Because if you don't, it would be the worst situation to be, you got the award, but you weren't able to carry out all the work because you didn't plan all the elements of your budget that you're then being charged for or needing to cover.
I had to add to that, I had the worst case of writer's block on describing the project until I went to the budget first and started plugging in things that were related, like just throwing the bits of the project into the bucket of the budget, and then started the narrative reshaped itself into something that looked like a proposal. Yeah, that was really important, and things get spendy fast, so it's like, okay, what things that are related to the project that might not be allowable, or it's not the things that NSF would pay for, that I need somebody else to pay for anyway, and it's like, okay, start looking at all the other partners, and then also I feel like was suggested, that we've been building toward this proposal and building toward having funding from NSF for a long time, so it could happen.
And just a note about budgets, I always look at them and I think the proof is in the pudding, that the budget really says whether you know what the technology is going to cost you, what the labor is that's going to be involved, whether you have a sense of how to value people's time and how they're being contributed, and it's kind of a litmus test for being in touch with what the figures are and what's going on in the field, and how much the elements that go into a project are going to add up to. We have a table in the exhibit hall. NEH and NSF are sharing it, and I think that for at least the short remainder of the afternoon, some of us will be at that table, so we'd be happy to have you come stop by and ask any questions of us there. So thanks very much for joining us.